Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Oh, wait a minute. Let me take off these glasses because you can't see nothing and I can't see y'all. I need you to see these eyes. Okay, now that them glasses is off and you can see me and I can see y'all, let's get into it. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Candle Crime Time, or if this is your first time here, welcome to Candle Crime Time. My name is Shanta, and yes, y'all, I've been gone for a little minute, but for a good reason. For some things, some goals that I have set for myself and achieved, and it just took up all of my time. And those developments are I started a new job, I started grad school, as you all know, or some of you may know. The first semester of that is coming to an end at the beginning of next month, and your girl did well. Go me. Also, I moved into a new place. As you could tell by the backdrop, it's completely different than how you've seen me before. I might film my intros and outros with this background, but you'll see the progression as I continue to decorate and personalize my place, because I'm going for a Bratz girl aesthetic, but I need an all-white bed. And an all-white bed helps me bring the colors to life. So if you got any ideas, let me know down below. Anywho, I did not forget about you all. I missed you all dearly. I love talking about true crime cases and also doing candles and other smell good products. So what we do on this channel here is we tell the cases or the stories of those that you may have never heard of, or the stories that may have faded away from memory. I also make a smell good product or candle while telling this story. Like today, our story will be the Atlanta child murders, a case that gripped Atlanta between the years of 1979 and about 1981. Most of you, like myself, were nowhere near born or even thought about when this case occurred, because this is a real life case, real life tragedy, and real life families that were affected. Just to give you an example of how long ago this case happened, my mom was 2 when the first child went missing in 1979. It's interesting because the politics and the semantics and the controversy and criticisms that surrounded the case back then still remain prevalent today when it comes to how law enforcement investigates the missing child cases of Black children or marginalized communities. And I just wanted to dive right into this case, give you all of the facts, all of the victims, because we do want to tell their stories. They are children and they were also young adults. But again, they were real victims and they have real families that are to this day still haunted by what happened. There are some answers, but as always with these cases that deal with Black victims or any other marginalized person, there are a lot more questions still remaining. So without further ado, let's get into the Atlanta child murders, talk about the victims, talk about the investigation, or lack thereof. Let's talk about the perpetrator and the theories and how it affects us today as a community. Between 1979 and 1981, Atlanta was shadowed by a chilling mystery. A series of disappearances and brutal murders unfolded, which gripped the city in fear and uncertainty. This would become one of the most haunting and controversial cases in U.S. history, the Atlanta child murders. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, Atlanta witnessed the tragic loss of 28 lives, primarily Black children and young adults. These disappearances sent waves of anxiety and grief through the city, creating a tense atmosphere where parents lived in constant dread and children were warned to never walk alone. This case not only revealed deep-seated issues within law enforcement and society, but it also challenged the community's resilience and resolve to protect its own. The Atlanta child murders began gaining attention in mid-1979 when reports of missing children surfaced. One of the earliest known cases was that of Edward Hope Smith, a 14-year-old who vanished in July 1979. Weeks later, his body was discovered, showing signs of violence. Soon after this, 13-year-old Alfred Evans was found dead under similar circumstances. Both boys were discovered near each other, which set off an ominous pattern that hinted at a more sinister force at work. As the months passed, more children and teenagers disappeared, again mostly young black boys. Each new report struck fear deeper into the heart of the community. Parents kept their children indoors, and the streets emptied earlier and earlier each night. By 1980, the death toll had risen, and the bodies were often found in wooded areas or near rivers, indicating that the perpetrator or perpetrators were methodical and familiar with the area. The pace of the disappearances and the murders also quickened, and the public's anxiety turned into demands for action. One of the most significant turning points came in 1980 when the body of 9-year-old Yusuf Bell was found in an abandoned school. This case drew media attention and further highlighted the urgent need for answers. By the time 1981 began, the murders had reached a national audience, now at this point putting immense pressure on law enforcement to figure out who this is or who were the people involved in this. The discovery of the hair fiber linked to multiple victims became a focal point of the investigation, suggesting that it was only a single suspect that might be responsible. Initially, law enforcement faced immense challenges as they struggled to connect the cases, and they lacked the resources needed for a comprehensive investigation. By late 1979, as the pattern of disappearances became evident, the police were under intense pressure to act. The FBI even eventually joined the effort, applying advanced techniques like criminal profiling and fiber analysis. Despite these measures, jurisdictional challenges and miscommunication between agencies hindered the progress. The victims were discovered in various locations that often pointed to a meticulous and elusive suspect. The victims were Edward Hope Smith, age 14, who was found shot to death in a wooded area. Alfred Evans, age 13, he was also discovered close to Edward Smith and was strangled. Milton Harvey, who was 14, his body was found in a remote area after being missing for weeks. Yusuf Bell, age 9, found in the basement of an abandoned school, partially clothed and showing signs of trauma. Angel Lanier, age 12, discovered tied to a tree, strangled, and not far from her home. Jeffrey Mathis, age 10, found 11 months after he disappeared, and he was severely decomposed in a wooded area. Eric Middlebrooks, aged 14, was located in an alley, and he was bludgeoned to death. Christopher Richardson, age 12, his body was discovered months later in a river. LaTanya Wilson, age 7, her skeletal remains were found near her neighborhood after a long search. Aaron Weish, he was 10, and his body was found near a railway. Anthony Carter, age 9, was discovered in an abandoned building, and he had been stabbed. Earl Terrell was 11. He was found in a river after being reported missing for weeks. Clifford Jones, age 13, body was found behind a shopping center, and he was strangled. Darren Glass, age 10, missing. His body was never found, but he is presumed dead. Charles Stevens, age 12, found in a wooded area and was strangled as suffocated. Patrick Rogers, age 16, was found in a river. Luby Jetter, age 14, and he was discovered on the side of the road, strangled. Terry Pugh, age 15, was found by the highway, also strangled. Patrick Baltazar, age 11, found in a wooded area near water. Curtis Walker, age 13, found in a river. Joseph Bell, no relation to Yusuf Bell, age 15, was discovered in a wooded area and showed signs of strangulation. Timothy Hall, age 13, was found in a river, and he was the last confirmed victim that was linked to the case. William Barrett, age 17, found strangled near a highway. Eddie Duncan, age 21, discovered in a river. Michael McIntosh, age 23, found near a river. Jimmy Ray Payne, age 21, found in the Chattahoochee River. Larry Rogers, age 20, body was found in a river. And John Porter, age 28, was located in a wooded area. The varying conditions and locations of where the bodies were discovered made it challenging for law enforcement to initially link the cases definitively at first. Frustrated by the pace of the investigation, community members took proactive measures to protect their neighborhoods and search for the missing children. Parents organized watch groups, they patrolled the streets, and even coordinated search parties. Churches and local organizations hosted town meetings to exchange information, offer support, and put pressure on city officials to act more decisively. The public's vigilance and unity were pivotal in maintaining attention on the case, ensuring that the voices of the victims and their families were not overlooked. As investigators crossed off their list of suspects, Wayne Williams became the prime suspect in the Atlanta child murders after a series of key developments. Wayne Bertram Williams was a 23-year-old freelance photographer and a music promoter who lived in Atlanta. He was known for his intelligence and entrepreneurial pursuits, but had a somewhat peculiar reputation in his community. Williams was arrested on June 21, 1981, after a dramatic sequence of events. In May of 1981, an FBI surveillance team heard a loud splash while monitoring the James Jackson Parkway Bridge over the Chattahoochee River, a location where several of the victims had been found, as mentioned earlier. Shortly after, Williams's car was stopped as it exited the bridge. His suspicious behavior, as well as the fibers later found in his home and in his car, matched those fibers that were found on the victims, led to his arrest. Wayne Williams's trial began in January 1982 and was one of the most publicized court cases of its time. The prosecution's case heavily relied on forensic evidence, including the carpet fibers and dog hair that matched samples found on several of the victims. This circumstantial evidence formed the backbone of their argument, suggesting that Williams had been in contact with multiple victims. His defense, however, argued that the evidence was too weak and circumstantial to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Despite these arguments, the jury found Wayne Williams guilty of the murders of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, 2 adult victims. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. And although Wayne Williams was not formally charged with the murders of any of the children, officials attributed at least 22 of the cases to him following his conviction. Even after Williams's conviction, many in the community, including the families of the victims, remained skeptical. Critics pointed out that the case against him was based largely on circumstantial evidence, and they also argued that the real culprit or culprits might still be at large. Some theories over the years have proposed that the murders were racially motivated and involved multiple perpetrators, potentially tied to groups like the KKK or the Ku Klux Klan. Other skeptics noted the inconsistencies in witness testimonies and the pressure on law enforcement to quickly find a suspect just to calm down the public's outcry. Decades later, the case continues to garner attention. In 2019, then Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and Police Chief Erica Shields announced that evidence in the Atlanta child murders would be re-examined with modern forensic technology. The decision was made in response to calls for closure from victims' families and public interest in determining whether any new findings could be made. As of recent years, some officials have expressed doubts about Williams's sole responsibility for all of the murders, leading to renewed questions and hope that further investigations might shed light on unanswered questions. Also, Wayne Williams maintains his innocence from prison and has since day one. I do want to preference that. The legacy of the case continues to shape discussions around justice, race, and community trust. The Atlanta child murders profoundly affected the city and reshaped conversations about race, safety, and justice in America. The case exposed stark racial and socioeconomic divides, highlighting how law enforcement's response differed from missing children in predominantly black communities compared to other areas. For many residents, the slow pace and the missteps in the investigation along the way underscored systemic racial inequalities that fueled distrust in police and government officials. The impact extended even beyond Atlanta, prompting national discussion on child safety and community vigilance. The case led to more organized local crime watch groups and increased awareness of missing children's cases across the country. The loss of so many young lives resonated through generations, acting as a somber reminder of how communities can be neglected when they are marginalized. Over time, the legacy of the case has been re-examined. The advancement of forensic technology, such as DNA analysis, has prompted officials to reconsider evidence that was once considered inconclusive. The case also contributed to changing policing practices, highlighting the importance of community cooperation in investigations. It underscored the need for compassionate and equitable law enforcement approaches that do not overlook any group based on raw or economic status. While the conviction of Wayne Williams brought a measure of closure for some, others argue that the full truth has yet to be revealed. Continued efforts to re-examine evidence and open dialogue around unsolved cases has inspired hope that future breakthroughs may finally provide definitive answers. The memory of the Atlanta child murders remain a powerful reminder of resilience and continuing fight for justice in communities that have often been silenced. Behind the headlines and case files were real children and young adults with aspirations, families, and stories that deserve remembrance. One of the youngest victims, Yusuf Bell, was only 9 years old when he disappeared, and he was described by his mother as bright and energetic, known for his love of school and his playful spirit. His loss left a hole in his community, highlighting the innocent lives being lost. Alfred Evans, 13, was another young soul with a bright future. His family recalled his love of sports, especially basketball, and how he would light up any room with his smile. Angel Lanier, 12, was remembered as a kind and nurturing girl who was always ready to help her siblings and neighbors. Her tragic death struck a deep chord, illustrating that girls too were not safe from the shadow that cast over Atlanta. Another victim, LaTanya Wilson, was kidnapped just one day before she would have turned 7. She was also a victim that should not be forgotten. Edward Smith, his nickname was Teddy, and he was described as loving karate, skating, basketball, and football. Patrick Baltazar, he was only 12, and he was described as loving video games, like most kids his age. Terry Pugh was only 15, and he was described as loving basketball. Patrick Rogers was only 15, and he was belovedly known as Pat-Man. Luby Getter or Jetter was only 14. He was described as loving baseball, and his nicknames were Chuck, Rosie. Little Aaron Jackson, 9. He was nicknamed Junior, and he loved swimming. All of these children and the other victims that were adults had bright futures, had a whole life to live, and unfortunately their lives were taken from them in such a brutal way by either Wayne Williams or another perpetrator or other perpetrators. These children and adults were more than just a name on the list. They were beloved sons, daughters, and siblings whose dreams were just unjustly cut short. Their families have spent decades seeking justice and peace, while having to honor the memories of their children who were lost way too soon. The Atlanta child murders remain one of the most haunting and tragic cases in American history. The unresolved questions and the lasting pain continue to weigh heavily on the families and their communities affected. While Wayne Williams' conviction brought some answers, doubts is not too far behind, and the call for complete understanding of what truly happened has never wavered. The echoes of this case remind us of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and justice for all communities, especially those historically marginalized. If you have any thoughts, memories, or insights regarding the Atlanta child murders, I encourage you to share them respectfully in the comments. Disclaimer, please keep it real cute. These are real victims, these are real families, okay? And this is a real case. I don't want to have to get ugly. Anywho, let's please use this platform and many other platforms on social media to honor the memories of the victims and to reflect on the lessons that this case in particular continues to teach us as a community. Your voice matters, and together we can continue to shine a light on stories just like this one. Remember, the fight for justice and safety for all children is ongoing. Please consider supporting organizations that work tirelessly to bring awareness to missing children's cases and providing support to their families. Most notable, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and other similar groups play a crucial role in these efforts. By staying informed and involved, we can contribute to creating a world where such tragedies are less likely to be repeated. It's essential to remember that behind each statistic is a child who had dreams, hopes, and a family who absolutely loved and adored them and cherished them. Their stories are not just a part of history, they are a reminder of the work we must continue to do to protect our children and advocate for justice. Please let me know your thoughts, opinions, feelings down in the comments because I'm really interested in knowing what you think about the Atlanta child murders. And do you agree with investigators that Wayne Williams was solely responsible, or do you agree with some of the other theories that there is other perpetrators out there, or do you think that the truth lies somewhere in between? I'm really so interested in hearing what you have to say. And so that'll do it for the Atlanta child murders and Mr. Wayne Bertram Williams. What are your thoughts? As I said, I want to really know what you all think now that you have all of the facts and you have all of the details and you have all of the theories out there. What do you think? I forgot to mention earlier that the ways that Wayne Williams was acting suspicious to investigators was because when they stopped him on the bridge, he stated that he was going to check out a neighborhood ahead of an audition he had the next morning with a singer by the name of Cheryl Johnson. However, when they looked into that with the phone number and the name he provided, investigators found that he was lying. Also, when investigators brought Wayne Williams in for questioning, they noticed that he had scratches on his face and arms, which could have been signs that he was involved in a struggle with someone, but he couldn't explain where those scratches came from. Also, he did fail a polygraph 3 times. And what's also interesting is that Wayne Williams was only convicted for the murders of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Payne. Nathaniel Cater was missing for 4 days. However, 2 days after Wayne Williams was stopped on the bridge that night, the investigators heard that big splash. Nathaniel Cater was found in the Chattahoochee River, which prompted investigators to believe he murdered Nathaniel. Do you believe that Wayne Williams is 100% responsible? Do you think he is 50% responsible? Do you think he had a team? Do you think he had partners? Do you think that it was the KKK or other hate groups like the Proud Boys or whatever? Because again, this is Georgia and this is the 70s and 80s. And yes, the civil rights movement was literally just 15 years prior, but Georgia is still the South. And though Atlanta is kind of like the black people Mecca, as currently, it probably wasn't always like that, even back then in the 70s and 80s. So yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts are, because I first came across this case when I was in high school, and I had to do it with my forensics class, and we had to talk about the fiber evidence. And back then, I was totally convinced that this man was guilty and that he was the one that did all of the murders of all of the victims that were mentioned in this story. However, that was going to be 10 years ago next year. I graduated high school in 2015, and I had that class senior year. However, now that I've gotten older and have revisited the case more and more as an adult and can look at it with adult eyes, and being a forensic psychology student with a bachelor's in criminal justice, having to come across this case multiple times throughout my undergrad tenure, I believe that Wayne Williams, he may not have killed, all of the victims. I'm not totally convinced that Wayne Williams is the sole perpetrator of the Atlanta child murders. I can subscribe to the theory of the KKK. I can subscribe to the theory of other perpetrators, because we all know all of these serial killers throughout history at some point in time have overlapped and ran over top of each other. So it's really hard to pinpoint which victims belong solely all the time. It's really hard to pinpoint definitively which victims belong to which perpetrators. And I think that Wayne Williams, because he was a weirdo to his community, he was the easiest fall guy. I just think that he was the easiest fall guy. A lot of the witness testimonies are kind of inconsistent. Fiber evidence and dog hair, that's not as definitive to me to 100% say someone is guilty or innocent. There's like no other evidence that I've seen. I've never remember reading that any of the victims were like definitively seen with him in broad daylight, and if it is, I might have overlooked it and it just might have faded away from memory. But yeah, I do not think that Wayne Williams is 100% responsible for the Atlanta child murders. Now, as far as the adults, it's kind of tricky there too. But as far as the children, and plus, usually serial killers don't deviate from their method of killing. You have stabbings, you have asphyxiation, you have strangulation, you have shootings, and all of the bodies were not dumped in the same area. Usually, historically, serial killers also dump their victims in similar environments: woods, the river. They might bury them in their backyard, like some psychopaths. So it's just, or sociopaths. So it's just, I'm not totally convinced that it was 100% Wayne Williams. I really do hope that somewhere along the way, someone decides to take this case seriously and definitively gives us an update on the investigation into the new evidence analyzation. The evidence analysis. I really hope that one day we can finally have a definitive answer as to who is or who were all responsible for the Atlanta child murders. But as always, I am so much more interested in hearing what you have to say. I have my thoughts. I want to know yours. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video with anyone who may not have heard about these murders or who just need a reminiscent of the Atlanta child murders, because some of you who are from Atlanta, some of you who were near that area or just grew up knowing about the case, this is going to hit home for you. It's going to be a very stark reminder of a very dark time in your childhood. But yeah, that's it for me. I can't wait to see you all in the next one. Peace.